I need to welcome everybody to your Healthy Self podcast and webinar, and so excited to have everybody on today. We have once again some amazing guests to the show, and so before I dive in there, make sure if you haven't been able to attend our Health Accelerator challenges every Wednesday at 4:30. We just had another amazing meeting with some wonderful people, and so I challenge you guys to hop on that. It's 4:30 every Wednesday. This is where we do a group meetup, a lot more dialogue, and then we're doing content and creating challenges for you to take your health to the next level. So if you haven't taken a look at that, or if you haven't had a chance to hop on that, reach out to us. You can message in the chat box here. Reach out to Anne. That's ANNE.markt, MARKT, at gowellness.com, and she will get you all set up. You can also go to AccuEastWest.com/HAC, hack, or stands for Health Accelerator Challenges. Look at that and check it out. I want to see you guys on there. So our show today, we're resuming. This is round two. Really excited about this. Last week I was not able to be on. I was getting some stuff prepped for our event. So Regan was our main host and moderator. So I'm going to be taking over kind of the moderator host seat. And so we have with us Regan Archibald, founder of Go Wellness, East West Health, founding member of Anodyne Pain and Wellness. And along with him, we got our two-star guest today, Dr. Paula Marchionda. Paula, how you doing? Welcome back.
Good. Thanks. Always glad to be here.
How's Colorado treating you today?
Oh, it's beautiful and sunny. It was like gloomy 2 days ago, but it's beautiful and sunny. It's the I learned yesterday, it is the quickening of spring. So it's not spring yet, but things are starting to stir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Ken, so we have Ken Baird. He is in sunny St. George along with me. He's just in the other room. We should be like high-fiving, Ken. Or give me a high five. There we go, yeah. So how's it going this morning, Ken?
You know what? I really like being in St. George because it's warm this time of year. My kid told me it was going to be 8 degrees up in Colorado, so I'm happy with the 64 degrees it was last night.
Yeah. Oh,
nice.
Yeah. Gotta love it. All right. Well, enough about the weather. Let's get into some real sauce here today. I'm gonna sit back, eat some popcorn, and listen to you guys are providing some really cool insights and thoughts on what's going on in healthcare today. What is the hottest topic? So I'm going to turn it over to you, Regan, and then everybody type your questions in the chat box. If you have a question and you're on the radio, I would challenge you to give us a call if you want to ask a question to these guys as well. You can call the St. George office and I'll have them just say, I need to talk to Cade. He's on the webinar right now. It's 435-773-7790. All right. Turn it over to you, Regan.
All right, let's kick it off. So this is our COVID concerns part 2, and we'll probably have a part 3 as Paula used a great word. What did you call it? It was
post-viral syndrome?
Well, post-viral syndrome, but we're in what kind of a slightly logical sequence in
semi-logical.
Semi-logical. I thought that was pretty cool. So it's a semi-logical sequence, but today we're going to dive deeper into the vaccine, if you want to call it a vaccine. And so, first of all, I don't know if anyone had a chance, Paula or Ken, I don't know if you watched a really interesting documentary that actually, it was an award winner for the Indie Short Film Festival. And out of the Los Angeles International Film Festival, it's called COVID Tango and the Logom Way. And this basically a psychologist from Argentina who's a tango dancer, but she noticed that with the lockdown, a lot of her patients, she went from seeing them face to face to a meeting format similar to this. And she just noticed that the amount of abuse, of loneliness, depression. All of the side effects of being locked down were very severe. And so she just started questioning it. She saw her kids not being able to be in school. So it's similar to what we talked about last week, which is where I want to kind of dovetail. And so she did a whole documentary and flying to Sweden, and she was able to meet with Sweden's prime minister. And Sweden's been under a lot of scrutiny because they didn't do what the rest of the world did. And they didn't lock down. They said, hey, we're going to put a lot of emphasis and a lot of trust in the citizens. Wow, that's novel, right? And we're going to let you guys decide. And we're going to really we're going to talk to the people who are most at risk, which, as we know, it's no different in the United States or anywhere else in the world. But the people who are the highest risk, play it safe. You know, you're the ones that you may not want to be out on the streets. You may want to be more cautious. And so they had the elderly, kind of stay back instead of stopping society for everyone. And man, talk about scrutiny. I mean, it's about every other day. The New York Times just can't wait to get on top of Sweden and just tear them apart. And it's actually, Stockholm is my favorite city I've ever been to in my life. I love Stockholm. And as the psychologist looked at it, she said, yeah, some of the things that she discovered when she was in Sweden is that they are very conscientious people. They're very concerned about their elderly, very concerned about their grandparents. But if you look at the overall death rates, it's a difference between dying from COVID or dying with COVID. And that's really what they're looking at, which are two separate markers. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, Dr. Paula and Ken. But have you guys followed Sweden at all during the entire lockdown and the last year?
So
Not really.
I looked at them in the beginning. I haven't really been following as close. I've been really following my local issues a lot closer.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually like Mesa County itself, where I live, Colorado in general, and Utah and Arizona, I've been keeping a close eye on. Sweden, I watched in the beginning because I thought what they were doing was very interesting. Trusting your own citizens. Wait, what is that? So, yeah, I think it's really interesting what's gone on over there. And they've had spikes and things too. So, but it's kind of interesting to have that outlier case study.
Yeah, it was interesting when you look at Sweden. They had a very mellow flu season in 2019. So the winter, where people are the most vulnerable, that's where influenza can take us out, as we get older in life. With every birth comes attached to it a death, right? So we're all going to die eventually. And unfortunately, in the flu season, that's where influenza takes them out. And they had a very mild flu season for one reason or another. And then, so when they got hit initially in kind of that March, April, they did have an initial spike, and everyone's like, "Oh, they need to take this serious." And there's bans. If you'd been to Sweden, you couldn't come back into certain countries, and the UK, it just drove them crazy. And Boris Johnson, what they've done in London and the UK is they're just putting more and more lockdowns. And so she uses the analogy of the parent-adult-child relationship. She's a therapist, and I remember when my therapist went through this with me, and I at East West, this is our model. I said, I only work adult to adult. I don't want to go parent-child, because if you put Regan in an authority position, it's not going to go well for anybody, right? Because what do children do when you go parent on your kids? What happens to the kids? How can they react?
We rebel.
We rebel, or we get fearful, right? Oh man,
Right.
Dad just put me in timeout. How long am I going to be here? And
I'm sorry, I rebelled. Maybe normal people get scared.
I just acquiesce.
you just went comatose. Yeah, right, kid. I doubt that.
Curled up in the corner and just didn't worry about it.
Yeah. No, when I would get reprimanded, it was like, man, there's some fear, but I was like you, Paula, mostly rebellion. And so it's no different in our society, because you see people coming out, and there's riots and there's craziness. And then you have people who are just glued to the TV, and they will not do anything that would, even remotely go outside of what the government officials are saying. And so this is when the government starts imposing fees, and fines, and that creates that parent dynamic. And so what Sweden's done is they've stuck adult to adult, and they've always had a lot of trust in their citizens, and that's why it's called the Lagom way. So I would encourage you guys to read that, because the reason I wanted to frame the conversation with this, because I think it's so important right now as we share with you some of the facts about the vaccine that's going on. You need to make a choice. And if we all just roll over, and if we become children in this process, and if we don't stay adults, then there could be people that are injured worse than what's going on with this virus, with this disease. So it's like William Osler, I quoted him last week. There's always two cures in medicine. One is for the disease and one's for the treatment. And maybe today we will help share some information where you guys can choose for yourself what this is and what your plan of action is. Because first of all, if you look at a vaccine, so let's define some things. So I got some information and a little more clarity. So a vaccine is a product that stimulates a person's immune system to produce immunity to a specific disease. And then if you look at what Washington State's health department and many states have associated with that, they say it's a preparation of a killed or living microorganism. So anything you guys disagree on that, Ken or Paula, anything that I said that on a vaccine that you would add to or take away from, or anyone on the chat box or anywhere?
I mean, that's the basic definition we've used for years.
Right.
I don't think it's changed, right? So preparation of a killed or living microorganism,
Or
product that stimulates a person's immunity to a specific disease. So it's a product, and what that product is you go into further detail, it's a killed or living microorganism.
well, no, a product is not necessarily a killed or living microorganism. If we look at current vaccines, one of the vaccines that we always have been using for years is bits and pieces of a microorganism. And
Right.
so if we're using bits and pieces of a microorganism, the question then becomes, how do we get those bits and pieces of the microorganism? It's the bits and pieces that will create the immune response, not whether or not it's a piece of the microorganism. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm not the guy breaking up the bits and pieces of it, but either virus, if you're going to break it up, you're going to change the nature of the expression of that viral structure, right?
I don't know what you mean with that question.
Because if you're using a microorganism, if you're using a killed or living microorganism, it's going to have an expression. It's going to have a secretome that allows your body to produce antibodies against that particular disease. When you say break it apart, I just don't know what you're referring to there, because if you break something apart, then you're going to change the expression, which would change your immune response to it.
I don't know that that's a true statement. Now, we can talk about whole virus vaccines, which are easy to understand. I have a vaccine that I took the virus and I damaged it in some way that is not going to cause a problem with me. So we look at the old polio virus, that it was the whole thing, but it was damaged so that it wasn't going to give you polio, except
Right.
that sometimes it did.
Sure.
But we have other vaccines that we have a protein subunit vaccine, which we already use, which takes parts of the virus that our body reacts to the most and says, these are the bits and pieces we're going to include in the vaccine. And so this is something that we're already doing. Now, what I hear you saying is that if I'm only doing that, then I'm not going to react properly to the whole vaccine or to the whole virus. Is that correct?
I'm just getting clarity. I don't know, but
Well, you're asking a question and I'm trying to clarify, because what I'm hearing you say is that if you are only putting parts of the virus in there, then you're not going to get a full response.
Is
That
it
seems to me the
possible?
question you asked, correct?
I'm saying, how do we get the antibody response? And that's it. And if
Okay.
it's from parts, that's fine. So
So the antibody response is going to be to different parts of a virus. And there are parts of the virus that the body will identify and say, wait, that's not human. That's not me. That's a problem. Let's
There we go.
identify it.
Exactly.
Um,
Yep.
There
Yeah.
are, it's not going to have every single piece of the virus that it's going to respond to. There are going to be bits and pieces it
Yep.
responds to, and thus we already have vaccines that have bits and pieces in them
Yep.
of a virus so that we can respond to them.
Great. So we
So
can move on. Go ahead, Paula.
I don't, so you also said a change in expression. So our prior vaccines are not a DNA vaccine or an mRNA vaccine. They're usually to bits and pieces or dead virus or whatever, or certain proteins,
Yep.
but they are not nucleic acid based. There are DNA vaccines in the veterinary world. For instance, for West Nile, there's a vaccine for horses for West Nile, but there are no human approved DNA or mRNA vaccines. So these mRNA vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer are emergency use authorized. They are not approved. And really, in fact, what we're doing is a phase 3 trial right now on those. And then the DNA vaccine from Johnson & Johnson, and I believe AstraZeneca.
Correct.
Well, AstraZeneca is DNA based too, but it seems like Johnson & Johnson might be closer to being EUA'd, also not approved. And we have never used mRNA or DNA vaccines before in humans
Right.
in the US.
Correct.
And this is where
So that
this is
based
the
on nucleic
delineation.
acid, that is how an expression might come in, I think.
Got
I'm
it.
sorry to talk over you.
No, I think this is great. So as people look at their choice, because Fauci came out today and he says, okay, in April we should have mass vaccinations ready for everybody. The state of Utah is saying everybody will be able to get vaccinated by May. I mean, the quantities are here. But the real question is, what is this doing? Because if you look at Moderna, they're not making claims that this is going to allow you to have immunity towards coronavirus. So what are they doing? What is the mRNA and the DNA, the DNA vaccines doing?
I'm not sure that I agree with that. They are showing data, and we can talk about the fidelity of data some other time, but they are showing data that is conferring immunity and antibody response and reducing severity of disease and reducing death.
Yep.
One thing they're not showing, nobody's been showing this yet, is how it's affecting contagiousness. So say I get the vaccine, I get exposed. Am I a carrier? Am I still contagious to other people or not? And we don't know that. And
Right.
we know, last time I checked, we know that when you have actual coronavirus, your immunity from that lasts, we think, at least 6 months. It may be a little longer now, but we haven't been studying it long enough to say it lasts a year. But you would think soon we might be able to say that, but it always takes a while to get your studies going. We might be up to 8 months now. I haven't seen the data. Last time I looked, we know 6 months you have some immunity after having actual COVID. We don't have that data on the vaccines because we haven't been giving them long enough.
Sure.
And if we do, it's very small trial data.
Yeah. And let me jump into the chat box real quick here, and I appreciate you guys being on. It's not, once again, we're trying to make sense for everybody so that everybody can hopefully not jump into the parent-child mode and just do it out of fear, or because our parents told us to, therefore we're going to do it. But maybe we could look into this.
There is a good question here on the concerns of altering the RNA in my cells. So RNA is, and the RNA they're talking about is a messenger RNA. I wish I had a whiteboard. Because if you have a cell, so we'll say this is a nucleus inside the cell. If the mRNA vaccine doesn't go in there, the DNA vaccine does, but the mRNA does not. The M stands for messenger. That mRNA comes out of the nucleus, goes to another organelle in the cytoplasm, and it then encodes for the protein, the spike protein of the virus. It never goes into your DNA. And then the mRNA is broken up and recycled. The DNA virus goes into the nucleus to code for the mRNA, and then the mRNA comes out and codes for the protein. So the DNA goes in your nucleus, the mRNA does not.
That's beautiful. Well said. Yeah.
Because there was a question of that being a concern. I don't want to change the RNA in my cells. You're technically not changing the RNA with the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine. It's introducing one to be coded. And then the DNA vaccine is incorporated into your genome to code. Well,
No, that's
no,
not
it's not
correct.
incorporated. It
No.
goes into the nucleus. It codes for the mRNA, but I don't believe it's incorporated into your own genome. Correct, Ken?
It is not.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I totally misspoke. I don't want to spread that fear.
Great.
That was wrong. But it just sends out an mRNA from the nucleus to be coded.
Can you see
Hey,
my
look at that.
circle with a little circle in the
There you
middle?
go.
Beautiful, Ken.
All right, so we have a cell, big circle, a nucleus, little circle. I'll put couple of little of our chromosomes. We have some little chromosomes inside the nucleus. Now, the other thing that we have, and we think about DNA, we think about DNA as being our chromosomes. And our chromosomes live in a nucleus, and that's how we work. So the interesting thing about our bodies is that's a lovely idea, except that the reality is we have extra DNA actually floating around both in our nucleus and in our cells. We call it extra chromosomal DNA. That can come from different places, such as our mitochondria. We love having mitochondria because they give us power. They let us be functional human beings. Those mitochondria have their own DNA inside of them. We have other bits and pieces of DNA that float around in our cells, in our nucleus, that are not attached to our chromosomes. Thus, they're not part of the instruction system that defines who we are, who we're going to become, how our bodies are going to run. This DNA vaccine, the goal behind it is that it, yes, will be a little piece of DNA, a little circle of DNA, but it's going to be floating around inside the nucleus, inside the nucleus, but it's not going to be incorporated into our 23 chromosomes, the parts that decide and run us. DNA tends to talk to RNA and create the RNA, and then the RNA leaves the nucleus, but that tends to occur inside the nucleus. So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine says, well, let's put a little circle of DNA that tells the body, create some proteins. And both the DNA and the RNA vaccines say, dear body, we want you to make some proteins that are going to look like this.
They're very
And
polite.
then the body says, okay, here's
May
some
I
proteins
ask
that look like this. Now, these look like those bits and pieces of the COVID virus that trigger an immune response. And so we're getting these bits and pieces. The difference is how we're getting them. Regan, you said, hey, we should be able to only get them from, well, you didn't say this. You said, hey, potentially they should only come from either living or dead viruses.
I was
so what we're
simply
saying
giving
is,
you the definition from Washington State. This was
we
not
looked at one
Reagan's
definition.
opinion. Yeah.
But you also read a different definition, which said the response to things. And so we're saying
And that
here,
was from the CDC, yes. A
okay,
product
so we're saying
a person's immune system to produce immunity to a specific disease.
that's a big word, Reagan, specific. So in any case, so we're saying, all right, rather than taking a bit and piece of the virus, we're going to tell the body, make something that looks like the problem piece.
Right.
Now, there was a question in the chat box that said, hey, what's my chance of getting the virus from a vaccine? These are the least likely to give you any sort of a virus or a sickness because the mRNA or the DNA are telling the body, make a piece, make another piece, make another piece. It's not saying make the whole virus, which can then live and grow and take off on its own and infect me. The chance of you getting corona from the vaccine is zero because it's not making corona, it's making bits and pieces of corona.
Right. So then people ask, so why do some people feel so horrible after the vaccine?
Sure.
And this is interesting to me. So I've had multiple friends and colleagues get the vaccine, and some have already had COVID and some have not. But the short answer is you can feel bad after getting the vaccine because it is your immune response to that particle. And what we see generally is you get an exposure, be it the vaccine or the actual virus, and your body produces a certain level of antibodies. On your second exposure, it produces a lot more. On your third exposure, it's pretty good. So if you see people who have had coronavirus and they get their first shot of a vaccine, they're sometimes up here and they have more symptoms. If they've never had coronavirus, then on their first vaccine, they're lower. And on their second vaccine, they're up here with a higher immune response. It's our body's response to that particle or to the virus initially that, or secondarily, on re-exposure to coronavirus, you can also have a higher you should have a higher immune response. And that includes like fever and muscle aches and all of that stuff. That's our body's immune response to these things. And that's why you see varying levels of people, in my opinion, varying levels of people responding to either the virus or the vaccine.
Statistically, some of the stats say that up to 50% of people by their second vaccination will experience some side effects from this vaccine. So I'll talk personally. My wife had her second vaccine the other day, and she was sick for about 4 days. Fever, lethargy, just a headache, didn't feel good for about 4 days. And her comment was, man, this is as bad as getting coronavirus. Now, we haven't had coronavirus, so we don't know. But presumptively, her response is that the initial shot, which she had no reaction to, primed her system a little bit and said, hey, here's something coming up. The second shot said, hey, it's coming back again. And using the memory portion of our immune system, the body said, wait, I've seen that before. And it throws a big, huge reaction, at which point she felt lousy.
Right.
Now,
and
it
we've
may
seen this
be
with the flu vax too.
Right. It may be that as we get better at this, we figure out ways to have a softer second response to the vaccine. But the response is showing me from a medical point of view that your body is identifying and responding so that if the COVID virus actually comes floating around, your body's going to say, wait a minute, I'm fighting that off, and you're not going to get it.
And so, Ken, maybe, I mean, the goal overall is to lessen the symptoms of COVID-19, right? That's
right.
I believe the goal is to lessen death rates, to lessen people going to the hospital. And so while people who get a vaccine may feel lousy for a couple of days, and there have been some people that have died after getting the vaccine. There are a couple of things that are sitting out there talking about a doctor down in Florida who got the vaccine and died within a short amount of time. And so that is a possibility. Now, we've given out however million shots of the vaccine, and at this point in time, we're seeing 1 or 2 people that have died. I don't want to sound callous at all, but if I can give a treatment to 1 million people and it only badly affects 1 out of 1 million people, that's really good for medicine as far as the effectiveness and how well it works out. So that part, I think the vaccines thus far have shown less severe illness, less hospitalizations, and less death. And there's been an exchange maybe which says, some of you people that are healthy, I'm going to give you the vaccine and you might feel lousy for a day or 2. But the overall result is the vaccinated folks have seen less hospitalization and less death and less severe disease, at which point we're saying, we're going to do a trade-off. A lot of people may not feel great for a little while, but a bunch of people that might have died aren't going to die.
okay. And I mean, when you consider Norway, I don't know if you've looked at what's happened there when they had a nursing home vaccinated, or the town in Spain where actually they had higher incidences of deaths and hospitalizations post-vaccine. I mean, have you looked at the outside world at all about this, Ken?
I have not. Now, I can't disagree that some things may happen, but I can't talk to whatever the 2 spots you're talking about.
Okay, and
I'd be interested in what the comorbidities were there and what was going on there.
right.
I mean,
Well,
there's so many factors.
and this is where we come back to it, where it's like, you know, you can be bought into the idea that this is the right direction and we have to do this to create immunity. My big concern too is, why are people getting vaccinated who've already had COVID-19? You know, it's some of the deaths that you alluded to, Ken. Some reports came out today. There's 4 people that died in Arkansas shortly after receiving the vaccine, and these patients were in their 80s. One of them, 2 weeks prior had COVID-19, had tested positive. So, you know, I'm just wondering, why do we need the vaccine if we've already had the disease? Maybe Paula or Ken, you guys could bring this up.
I mean, that's a good question. And I don't think there's a super good answer right now. I can tell you my one colleague who had COVID is over 70. She's in basically good health. She's a healthcare professional. So her facility wanted her to have the vaccine and she was not opposed to it. So she, even after having COVID, got the vaccine. I would assume by now her antibodies are quite robust. I have no idea how long they're going to last, but she's had her 2 shots, and I believe it was Pfizer, after having about a month after having COVID. I wonder if there's something in the timing, if it's more risky to do it within 2 weeks and a month, you know, because you get that second exposure, that second boost of reaction. Is that, you know, maybe there's a timing factor in there. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's looking at that. I'm sure somebody is. There's a lot of
Data out there.
brilliant minds working on this. But that, I mean, that's interesting to me. I know for some things like international travel, I believe it is, if you have a certification that you've had COVID, you don't need to prove you have had the vaccine, or you don't have to, you know, have your negative PCR test, because that'll be positive for, you know, could be positive for 90 days.
Sure.
So I think that's a really good question. I don't think we have a really great answer. I think the shoot from the hip answer from a lot of our leaders are just get the vaccine.
Right. Yeah. Just if everybody does it, if everybody follows in line and masks up, quarantines, does all these things, and we're good. Now, if everyone gets vaccinated, even better. So I'm just bringing it up as a question. So let's go to the chat box. We got Becky. Thanks, Becky. This is a great question. What are the best protocols for long hauler patients, those still recovering from COVID after 2 to 3 months or longer? And we're seeing more and more of these. And we talked about this a lot last weekend at Go Wellness. Paula, maybe you could jump in here. You have some great things you're doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, I believe our immune systems are our best protection. If we can keep our immune systems as healthy as possible, that's the best thing we could do. So I technically have autoimmune thyroid disease, or Hashimoto's. I've worked a lot on that. And I think the first time in my life, one of my antibodies is actually in the normal range. So, but technically I'm an autoimmune immunocompromised person, but I don't feel that way. I haven't been sick in months from like anything. I mean, a caffeine withdrawal headache is a whole different matter. But so I do everything I can to keep my immune system healthy. And I follow a lot of what the, what do their initials stand for? The Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance. I follow a lot of their recommendations. So it's the FLCCC. They have the mask recommendations. And they have some mostly for prevention, early treatment, intermediate, and severe. But a lot of those recommendations still apply to long-term COVID, because post-viral syndrome is not new. We see this with the flu every year. We see it with any viral disease. We just don't pay a lot of attention to it, frankly. So one thing COVID has done for us is to really highlight this post-viral illness or post-viral syndrome that has been around forever. And I think that's really important, because the number of people who have this after our regular flu season, which is much reduced lately, but they're ignored. And it can be the brain fog, the fatigue, that you mentioned some other things, Becky. Where is
energy, oxygenation, brain fog.
Yeah, all of that.
Big thing.
And it's all, I won't say it's all, but I mean, inflammation plays a huge role in this. And it's like we first thought the lungs were really a target in COVID. And really it's the whole inflammatory system and your circulatory system that's getting hit, which affects your lungs. So a lot of the same things still apply. And brain health. I mean, people, if you've lost your sense of taste or Oh, that would be taste or
Smell.
smell, not taste or smell.
Ooh, good
Um,
one, Paula.
I do that. Smell and taste. Maybe I should do it that way. Then to me, you are neurocognitively impacted. Now they can say it's the support cells of those systems that are affected. But if your support cells are affected, then your nervous system is affected because it's not getting the support it needs. So I take care of people's brain and nerves. If they tell me they've lost their sense of taste and smell, I'm like, okay, we're supporting your brain and we're doing it now. And I do that. I mean, we all have our ways to, all the providers on this, we have our ways of doing that. I believe in high dose DHA. So DHA is a component of omega-3s. The brain and nerves prefer DHA. Sometimes I use peptides. Sometimes I use, it depends on where they are in their stage, but probably higher than people normally take doses of vitamin D because everyone over the 35th parallel is vitamin D deficient anyway. And if they're my patients, I've already encouraged them to do that for the preventive stage. But if they've gotten COVID and afterwards, we continue that. We continue vitamin C, zinc. You guys know there's a product I like that activates your NRF2 system or pathway. So we use that, and one that activates the NRF1 pathway, important to mitochondria. So we activate that. And then another one that activates your NAD pathway. So I like to use that. So yeah, they're on a lot of stuff, but hopefully it's not long-term. But I kind of, once I see those cognitive things, we hammer that. Once you see fatigue, your mitochondria need support.
Right.
You need to decrease the inflammation. So we do all of that stuff that we normally do to do those things. We just focus it on the post-COVID patient. If they still have, now I've seen a lot of post-COVID pneumonia. So for that, I do nebulizer treatments.
Are you doing like glutathione,
With
hydrogen
glutathione and nanoparticle silver to help clean things out. Nebulizers are not expensive.
Right.
I mean, I'm not sure what they cost on Amazon or if you get it with a prescription or something, but you can get a nice quality nebulizer for less than $50.
Yeah. I was going to say
So
$25 on Amazon.
yeah, you can 25 to 50 and you've got a decent machine. The tubing and all that stuff doesn't cost. What costs is the glutathione and whatever product you're putting in there.
Yeah.
So, but I've seen people do great with that.
Mhm.
I had a patient, 90-year-old vet, had COVID. He's usually seen at the VA. He had a follow-up visit at the VA. They're like, you have post-COVID pneumonia, and I bet you'll be in the hospital, maybe in the ICU even in 2 to 3 days. And his family calls me, and he was already coming in for some IV nutrition, but his family called me that day, and they're like, what do we do? And we set him up with the nebulizer and everything. And they texted me later that night. They go, he's doing much better. I saw him the next day. We did some IV nutrition, which can be really helpful in COVID. Vitamin C and Myers, glutathione. So we did IV treatment on him. And then I talked to him a couple days later, or I talked to his family really, after he had a follow-up visit at the VA, and they couldn't find any evidence of his pneumonia. The guy's 90.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm a miracle worker. I'm just saying we can treat these things.
Right.
And the information isn't getting out. And I don't think it's all that much different than other post-viral syndromes. It's just that it's like screening for a cancer. Like when we started screening for prostate cancer, it's not like all of a sudden we had more prostate cancer. We were just aware of it.
Right.
So it's not like this is an unusual thing to happen, just that we're aware of it. And we can do things with it. And then getting back to, I think it's Irene, about, being immunocompromised.
Yep.
Immunocompromised in the vaccine. So I worry more about if your body is able to respond appropriately to a vaccine. Will it make the antibodies you want? Will it compromise your immune system more? I think that question is up for debate, but you may not have the response. And it might be harder for you to tolerate given your underlying condition. It depends on where you are in your autoimmunity. Like I said, I have Hashi's, and I feel like my immune system is pretty spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Becky, hopefully that answered your question. I mean, there's a lot of Chinese herbs. We spoke about some of this last night, actually. Some of the stem vive treatments that we've been doing. If you look at the Lonnie Sarah, if you have an initial outbreak, getting your zinc levels up is absolutely critical. Thymosin alpha 1 is one of those
Right.
peptides that I wish they would put in every vaccine. I know several vaccines have it in there, but it is a vaccine adjunct. Using thymosin beta 4 is another way. BPC 157. There's just so many things you can do these days to get your body strong, which is where I say, well, why we're going down such a risky pathway with a vaccine that that may not be a vaccine. I mean, I'm still, just with some of the definitions here, maybe we're doing things that are posing more risk than they are helping more people. I don't know this. I think it's too early to tell, but whenever a treatment like this is rushed to the market, then you've got lines of people waiting to get it, and there's a scarcity of it. It's a perfect marketing storm. And so, I'm going to encourage everybody to be skeptical until proven otherwise, because, if we look at the amount of patients, I have a nurse who works up at the University of Utah, and she said, man, all doctors can think of is it's got to be a COVID diagnosis. It's got to be COVID. And they'll test a patient 5-6 times. They won't look outside of the box. And then she's on the floor with patients who are receiving the vaccine, and they're there for 30 minutes, making sure there's no adverse reactions. And she's seeing a significant amount of people having a reaction. So don't mean to be the alarmist here, but I'm also like, let's be smart about this. Let me see, there's a couple other things. What else is in the vaccine? What's the carrier of the vaccine? And so I think this is where, Ken and Paul, you're talking about the mRNA or the messenger RNA. What is it? It's a lipoprotein carrier. Is that what's surrounding the mRNA so the body doesn't destroy it before it reaches the surface side of the cell?
Yeah, I think of it as a lipid in my cell. What do you think of it as?
I think that's a good thing. If we think about mRNA, just to go back to how the body behaves, the DNA makes this mRNA, and we don't want it running around forever, because if I just keep building up, all of a sudden we're making too much of whatever protein it is. So the body has proteases that go in and break down that mRNA so that it comes out, it does its job and goes away. Mm-hmm. So one of the problems with the mRNA vaccines initially is
a protease. So a protease breaks things up. I said the wrong word. Okay. It's like a digestion of it.
Yep. Thank you.
Sorry.
So in any case, the initial mRNA vaccines are only lasting a few seconds to a minute or two, and that wasn't doing any good because the body was working too well at getting rid of the mRNA. So they took the pieces of mRNA and they covered them in tiny bits of fat. The one concern with this is that part of that has polyethylene glycol associated with it. And so, as Paula will tell you, she's not a big fan of polyethylene glycol.
What's wrong with the petroleum? I grew up on a farm.
I'm fine with it in my car for antifreeze, but I don't feel like I need that in me.
So that has been put in there to help keep this stable. And there have been multiple instances of severe allergic response. Presumably, the best guess is that may be due to the existence of polyethylene glycol. Now, can I tell you what that's going to do to you long term? I don't know. But there is that in the vaccine that can be concerning to some people. The point of that is that it allows this mRNA to last a little bit longer, a few hours, as opposed to a few minutes, so that it can do its job. But then again, the body's going to chop it up, get rid of it, and dispose of it so that it's not sitting around left in you long term.
Got it. So any other things in there? So hopefully that answered your question, Bev. Okay, great.
I said, just FYI, I sent the link to the iMask updated protocol from the FLCCC on prevention and early treatment, prevention, prophylaxis, and early treatment. Yep. To the panelists, if you want to share that, if all you guys watching and listening want that, but you can also Google it really easy. And I wanted to say one big thing did happen. And that is, you may have heard of the use of ivermectin
Yep.
for prevention, prophylaxis, early treatment, even severe treatment. There's some actually excellent studies on it. What happened on January 15th, so almost a month ago, the WHO and NIH upgraded their recommendation on ivermectin. Before it was not recommended, and now and you may not think this is a big difference, but now it went from against to neither for nor against, which is the same recommendation given to monoclonal antibodies and convalescent plasma, which are being used widely. So it's actually a big change. And ivermectin is one of the world's safest, cheapest, and most widely available drugs. Literally, billions of people have received this drug, not for COVID. It's more for parasites and worms. That's how it's been used. But the way it works is it stops the virus from replicating. And it's FDA approved. This would be an off-label use, but it's FDA approved and has a fabulous safety profile and wonderful studies. And on the FLCCC site, you can actually link to all the studies on it. And they have a one-page summary of them, which is nice. So you don't have to read scientific literature if you want. It just tells you the bullet points. But that is, yes, ivermectin, my horse warmer. That is exactly what it is, Bev.
Yeah. Misha in our office is a horse. She does horse hoofing.
She's a farrier.
She's a farrier, and she's like, oh, I know ivermectin. But yeah, so the whole protocol with ivermectin is, and Steve's created this entire thing, but you've got melatonin, you've got zinc, you've got vitamin D. What else is in the ivermectin protocol?
So on the mask protocol for prophylaxis, it's ivermectin and it's weight-based dose, vitamin D3, vitamin C, quercetin, zinc, and melatonin. For early outpatient, it's very much the same, although they recommend using a pulse oximeter, a pulse ox to check your oxygen levels, and aspirin, unless contraindicated, because aspirin can be contraindicated. And then for early outpatient treatment, it's well, that's what I just said. Sorry. For prophylaxis was the first one I said, and prevention is very similar to that. But you can dose the ivermectin less frequently. So ivermectin isn't taken daily.
Right.
It's for prophylaxis, it's one dose, a dose on day one and a second dose 48 hours, and then a dose every 2 weeks. For post-COVID exposure, it's one dose and a dose in 48 hours. For early outpatient protocol, it's very similar. It's a dose daily for a minimum of 2 days and then continue until recovered, but only for a max of 5 days.
Yeah.
So, and ivermectin's not the cheapest thing, but it's not that expensive. Even if you pay full price, a prescription is probably less than $100. And you can get coupons on GoodRx that make it even less. So like I have ivermectin for me and my other half. We got prescriptions that we have that we can take. If I get exposed, if I feel ill, I will start my ivermectin. I will get, it's easy for me to get a PCR test in Mesa County, thank God. And then I personally have antigen tests because I need to protect my clinic.
Yeah. Yep.
So, you know, and I can always get, you know, there are more things out there than COVID. So then if I really, if those are all negative and I still feel ill, I'm getting a flu test, a strep test, or whatever I have to get. But it's the same stuff we use on horses and we've used on humans all the time because it's nearly eradicated some of our very common parasites and worms in certain parts of the world. Like I want to say it's sub-Saharan Africa that it's been used a lot in, but
yeah, it's kind of up there with the hydroxychloroquine. I think hydroxychloroquine.
I think it's better. I think the evidence is better and the side effects are fewer. Hydroxy has so many interactions with so many meds that it is a toughie, and ivermectin doesn't have that. It's way safer in my opinion. And I think the data shows that.
And I think that's great. Steve is, yeah, his ivermectin protocol in our clinics. He's got his little kits all out, and I see patients coming in for it. It's awesome. So, Paula, you had a question from Ruth. Do you think the PCR tests are valid?
So I think any test has a problem. I personally am tested on average once a week, because every 7 to 10 days, sometimes a little more frequent, sometimes less. It depends on my schedule. And I do that because I don't think any test is perfect. If I came back with a positive PCR, I'd follow up with an antigen test. And since I carry antigen tests in my office, if I get a positive antigen test, I can do a second one to verify. So I don't think any test is perfect. I know there's saliva ones, there's cheek swab ones. I stick with the nasal one, and where I get tested, I self-administer, and I think I do a better job. But, you know, I'm a doctor who used to be a nurse, who used to be a medic, who I've had a long time in healthcare, and I've had to do viral swabs on people before. So boy, my last sample I think was really good, but that's all we'll say about it. So I don't think any test is perfect. And the PCR test, I mean, there's multiple different machines doing it. So it depends on who's testing it, what they're using it, the training of the steps. There's a lot of steps involved. And most of ours are transported from the Western slope. A lot of the testing in Colorado is transported from wherever it's done to CDPHE, or Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, in Denver to get tested. So transport can affect things. So, you know, I mean, that's why we repeat test a lot. And so, yeah, so Ruth asked saliva or nasal. My gut is that the nasal is still better, but I haven't looked at the data recently, because I'm hearing that the saliva is equivalent, and just historically, I have a hard time believing that, but that doesn't mean the data doesn't bear it out. And
you see this, Allison's, and thanks for posting this, Allison. So she's sharing what she's done
Yeah.
for viral syndrome. Acupuncture, craniosacral, meditation, proper breathing to calm the autonomic nervous system. Yeah, and I agree. You know, these healing modalities are going to accentuate healing. You know, and obviously, like I mentioned last time, surgeon's going to want to do surgery on the body. An infectious disease doctor is going to want to create a vaccine. An acupuncturist and herbalist is going to want to put herbs and optimize the body that way when we're in a pandemic. So we all have our own opinions. So I couldn't agree more, Allison.
And I can't say enough about breathing, because a lot of Americans, I may have to stand up, they breathe up here.
Yeah.
They never breathe down here. We don't expand
breathing.
our whole lungs. And I mean, I don't care if it's a pandemic or not, you need to expand your whole lungs.
Right.
And the anxiety and depression, we're not just seeing this post-COVID, we're seeing this because of the whole pandemic and the isolation.
Yeah.
And it's huge. The mental health care people need and people are asking for now has tripled, Regan? Isn't it up like some extraordinary amount?
At least tripled. Yeah.
And like I said, in Colorado, they actually dedicated funds to this, which I was very happy about.
Awesome.
Yeah, but it's a huge, huge deal. Yeah, so Joy, lung expansion is so important.
Yeah.
Like, it's important whether we're in a pandemic, whether we're sick or not.
Yeah, we would not be in
major way of getting toxins out.
Yeah. Yes. So we're at the end. And I love that Ruth mentioned the book, Breathe. I think this is so phenomenal, because we've got to activate the thymus gland, and that's breathing. You know, as you're moving your chest, my Japanese teacher used to say chest breathing is sick breathing. So breathe diaphragmatically. But let's all do that a little more in our life, and we're going to come back with part 3. I don't know what week it will be. I know we've had to push things back to get our week 1 and week 2 back to back. So we're going to come back with the post-viral syndrome. kind of the complications that Dr. Paula and I deal with every day in the clinic. I think that would be very interesting. But Ken had to run to patients. That's why he bounced off early. Really appreciated his insights today. And Paula, you're as always just so phenomenal to talk to you about everything, not just medical, but everything in life. So thanks so much. Appreciate your collaboration and partnership. And for those of you on the show, we love you. Thanks so much for being part of this great community. And hopefully we gave you some insights so you can be a little smarter about whatever decision you choose. So, all right, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Same time, same place. Bye-bye.